everyone, Rainbow Staple here, and today we'll be going through a Speed Duel deck list. We're going to be going through the Chilling Outback deck. Now, I've been using this deck for a couple of months, and it's been doing quite well at locals, and, well, let's jump straight into it. So, let's start with the skill. So, this is Chumley from Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, and this skill will flip at the start of the duel and stay face up. It's called Chilling Outback, and it is, once per turn you can change one face-up koala or kangaroo monster's battle position. Koala and kangaroo monsters you control can attack whilst in face-up defense position, and if they do, use their defense for damage calculation. Now, this is quite a unique card since it lets you attack from defense position, so you'll be using a lot of koalas and kangaroos with a high defense value and some spells and traps that can help you with that. Starting out with the monsters, we first have 3 Des Koalas. Its effect is when it's flipped, inflict 400 damage for each card in their hand. So this will probably be the only koala you want to actually set face down rather than summoning and then activating the skill to turn it into defense position since it's once per turn. This is useful for getting some burn off on your opponent, and in Speed Duel, of course, you start with 4,000 life points, so getting a couple of bits of burn, especially if you draw it in your first hand, is quite useful just for speeding up the game a little bit. Next we have 3 Des Kangaroos. Now its effect is, if the attack of the monster that attacks this monster is lower than the defense of this card, destroy the attacking monster. So technically this is another one you can set, but you can also just summon and switch to defense. Now, alongside Des Koala, these have quite high defense stats, so this has 1,700, Koala has 1,800, so they're good, decent beat sticks on their own, and of course when they're in defense position, they can't damage you unless they have piercing, so you will be chilling for a lot of the game. And for our last monster inclusion, one of the more important ones, we have Sea Koala. This has 1,600 defense, and its effect is, once per turn you can target one face-up monster your opponent controls, and change that target's attack to 0 to the end of this turn. You must control another beast monster to activate and resolve this. So having one of these guys in defense position, you can kind of normal summon this guy, change him to defense, activate his effect, and then you can beat over almost any monster in the game. Very powerful card, and it's a must-have for this deck. Now I will note that because this skill is quite defensive, you can spend a lot of the duel just sitting on your defense position monsters, waiting for a boost to be able to get over their monsters. Now, there are a few trap cards and spell cards that we'll show off that can really take advantage of slowing the game down to this extent, and we'll get into those now. So, since this deck can be quite slow, we do run quite a few trap cards since we can take advantage of them. Here we have our limit 1 card in this deck, which is Nightmare Wheel. Now, Nightmare Wheel is obviously very powerful. If you don't know the effect, you can target a monster your opponent controls. It can't attack or change its battle position, and when it leaves the field, it gets destroyed. The other effect is it deals 500 damage during your standby phase to your opponent. So you can simply, if you can't beat over a monster with your koalas, you can stop it from attacking, and then over time you'll just slowly burn them to death, which is fine because it's very hard to get over these koalas and actually kill you quickly. So it's a very useful card to have. Next is our limit 3s. We run 3 Wall of Disruption. Now this card is brilliant, and it's hard not to include it. It's recently been added to the ban list with good reason. So if you don't know it, when your opponent declares an attack, all attack resistant monsters lose 800 attack for each monster they control. Another great feature of this deck is, because all your monsters are in defense position, if your opponent is running this, it won't matter to you. You don't care about your attack points, only the defense points. And in general, it helps get over those monsters that you can't beat over. And it also, once again, slows the game down so you can slowly burn them over time. So last but not least, we have the most important trap card of the deck. We run 3 Spike Shield with Chain. Now this says, target one face-up monster on the field, equip this card to that target and it gains 500 attack. Doesn't sound good so far, but if the equipped monster battles while in defense position, it gains defense equal to its attack during damage calculation only. What this means is, you can use this on any of your koalas and it will gain an insane amount of defense, which in this deck equals attack. So forgive me, I'm going to do some very quick math here. It turns Des Koala into a 3,400 defense monster. It turns Des Kangaroo into a 3,700 damage or defense card. And last but definitely least in terms of defense, it turns this Sea Koala into a 2,200 defense beater. So you can see how this card really does let you do a lot with these cards rather than just beat down with some very basic attack values. You really can even sometimes go for an OTK, specifically with the Des Koala. Set it turn 1, turn 3 you can flip it, equip it with the chain, and then you can usually OTK if you are lucky. That's it for the trap cards. Let's move on to the spells. First, we have an interesting one. We have Spiritual Forest. Now, this one isn't run in every list I've seen, but I always find it quite fun. So, the first time each beast, beast warrior, or plant monster you control would be destroyed by battle, it is not destroyed. So, this means if you have only one koala on the field, you can simply sit on it for a bit longer if the only thing your opponent has is attacking over them. It's not the greatest card, which is why we only run it at 1, but it's still pretty fun and can sometimes stop decks in their tracks. Next we have a Limit 2, Allure of Darkness. Now, I was tempted to run this at 2, but unfortunately couldn't find another copy, so if you do have another one, please do feel free to swap in the Spiritual Forest for the Allure, since we run quite a lot of dark monsters. This one's pretty self-explanatory. It lets you draw through to the cards you need in certain matchups, and that's about it. Next we have a Mask of the Accursed. Now this is very similar to the Nightmare Wheel, however you can't activate it during the opponent's turn, so that's why it is off the ban list. However, it does almost the exact same thing, except they can change the battle position of their monster, but it still inflicts 500 damage during the standby phase. So once you've slowed the game down, you can use Mask of the Accursed and Nightmare Wheel to burn over time, if you really can't get over your opponent's monsters. Lastly, we have a couple of removal spells. We have 2 Hammer Shots. This destroys one attack position monster of the field with the highest attack. Now, obviously, this works very well with this deck because you won't be having any attack position monsters, so it'll always be one of your opponent's monsters. So that's why we run these, and it also helps get over those monsters that you really just can't beat over. So this is it for the main deck. We'll be moving on to the side shortly, but I thought we'd do a little nice overview here. Now, the only cards I would consider cutting are the Spiritual Forest, possibly for another Allure of Darkness, and possibly changing up the Wall of Disruptions into Floodgate Trap Holes. However, because they're both Limit 3 as of the recent ban list, it is really up to you what you decide to run. Now let's move on to the side deck. I suppose first I should mention that I technically run these 2 fusion cards, but you don't really use any fusion here. This is just to kind of keep your opponent guessing on game 1 what deck you're playing. Really, I should include the full kind of 5 or 6. I don't even know the full limit, but yeah, these cards are just some of my favourites, so I put them in there. So I will admit my side deck is not exactly optimal, but there are a few choices in here that I would definitely keep. So first up we have a Lava Golem. Now this is great for, once again, if your opponent has monsters you can't beat over, but it does 1000 damage during each of their standby phases, which combined with the Mask of Accursed and Nightmare Wheels can kill your opponents in a couple of turns whilst you're chilling out back. Next we have a DD Crow. This is for the graveyard based decks that you may run into. However, I haven't really seen much use with this. I would run another copy of Lava Golem instead, but unfortunately I haven't been able to find another copy for a reasonable price. So if you do have 2 Lava Golems, please do switch in for the DD Crow or one of these following cards that will be coming up next. Now onto the spells, we run a Mask of a Curse, just because in some matchups this can be absolutely game winning on its own, so I keep it in there just in case you do need another one. Next we run another Spiritual Forest in the side deck. This is very questionable. I would definitely swap this out if you have another option, but sometimes a Spiritual Forest can be very, very useful in certain matchups if they don't have piercing, and the only way to win is to beat over your monsters, so sometimes this can be a really good card, but it's very situational. For another questionable pick, we have Macrocosmos. Once again for the graveyard-based decks, but since it's a one-off, it doesn't come up very often. I would change this if I could think of a better card to put in there. And lastly, we have Windstorm of Etiqua. Now, this is brilliant for the Cloudian matchup. I have a few Cloudian players at my locals, so I keep this in the side just for them. Now, the only problem with this card is if your monsters are in defense position, they will change to attack once you activate this. However, if your opponent is attacking, it should change all their monsters to defense, so you should be fine to activate this. That's it for the deck profile. I thought I would do a quick video showing this off before I retire it for a while. Since I've been playing this for a couple of months, I thought I would try out a new deck soon, so keep an eye out to see if you'll see a deck list for that there. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the list, please feel free to try it out. SpeedDuel is always quite cheap, so it should be pretty easy to pick up. This deck isn't exactly meta right now, but it's still really fun to play, and it does catch people off guard. If you've made it to the end of the video, please feel free to hit subscribe, new Yu-Gi-Oh videos each week, and as always, happy dueling.